Welcome to Change. It's sponsored by the Senior Bond of Schaumburg, where nutritious meals, friendly peers, and social activities are available every day of the week under the able direction of our director, Marina Lvovich. And the cost and the location are really available to all. And we seniors do meet once a month to talk about the past and its effect upon us today and also in the future. And today, our talk is going to be on music. I'd like to introduce our panel. We have Henrietta Leary. She was born in Chicago and now lives in Elmhurst, and she's a retired art dealer, interested in the opera also. At present, she's also quite active in the ICLRU, the Illinois Continued Learning at Roosevelt University, as we all are. Then we have Jim Cassina, and he was born in Berwyn and now living in Huntley. That was a big trip here, wasn't it, Jim?
Yeah.
And Jim is a retired operations manager, an entrepreneur, and a career consultant, and he has 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren, and again, active in the ICLRU. Then, last but not least, we have Bob Allen, and you were born in Omaha, Nebraska. How about that? And living now in Barrington, and he is a retired labor relations lawyer and human resource executive, and you have 4 children and 5 grandchildren. And again, part of the ICLRU. And of course, I am Laurie Candle. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm now living in Schaumburg. I retired from teaching 47 years ago, but I can't get away from it. And like all of us, I share in the teaching at the ICLRU. And I've been a member of the bond for over 12 years. Today, as we said, our topic is on music. And music is the solace of the soul. And music takes over where words seem to end. And as Henry Wadsworth Longfellow said, music is the universal language of mankind. It has reflected the culture and times of our people. It has also changed throughout the centuries, from the troubadours roaming around and singing their songs and the monks chanting their prayers. We have soldiers preparing for war with song, citizens protesting injustices, and of course with the evolution of technology, we all found that some sort of music that'll either soothe, excite, inspire, or have feelings we don't want to talk about. Carol Birkin of the Gilda Lehman Institute states that music is the soundtrack of our nation's history. Yankee Doodle was sung by the Revolutionary soldiers to mock the British, but the British were doing the mocking first. The Battle Hymn of the Republic, written by a woman, Julia Ward Howe, was a patriotic song of the Civil War. And of course, George M. Cohen's Over There inspired the soldiers in World War I. And who can forget Irving Berlin's God Bless America, rousing the patriotism of World War II. As our culture changed, so did music. Jazz and blues of the 20s and 30s paved the way to the big bands of the 40s. Elvis Presley revolutionized music with his rock and roll. The Beatles, disco, rap, hip-hop, hard rock all infused themselves into the current culture. And music is still changing. But it can't be denied that it's present even when there isn't any sound. So let's reflect back on our own childhood and discover the subtle encouragements that music played in our lives. What is your earliest memory of a song that was sung to you or you sang as a child, and who and where did it originate? Bob?
I grew up near St. Louis, and it was very hot in the summer. So our family would go out in the backyard in the early evening to try and cool off. And I can remember my mother, who liked to try and teach my sister and I, pointing up to the stars, and she would sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And then my sister would join in, then I would join in, and even my father. So that's one of my very earliest remembrances, was singing that song.
How beautiful.
Yeah, it's
Lovely.
wonderful thoughts.
Yeah, it is. It really brings back thoughts of childhood. I think they're still singing it today. Jim, how about you?
Interestingly enough, totally different than Bob. My dad had a deep voice, and we weren't a musical family as such, but I remember as a little boy, he would hum like symphonic music, like classical music, especially like Beethoven's Fifth. You know, and he'd go ba 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 bum, and I used to get such a kick out of that. And he'd go bum 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 bum, you know, that kind of music. And I still, to this day, as you mentioned that, I still recall him doing that. Not Twinkle Twinkle Little Star,
No, that wasn't one of his favorites.
And I hated classical music ever since. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
You shouldn't say that with Henrietta.
No.
How about you, Henrietta?
Actually, the first thing I remember is when we used to decorate our tree at Christmas, and we get the whole tree decorated. I mean, it was really not decorated according to, you know, an interior decorator, because we just sort of put anything any place. But then we would take out these little Christmas carol books. I still have one left. And we would all sit around in our off-tone voices and sing Christmas carols for the rest of the evening. And we got free cookies too.
Oh, well, that's
There was a reward at the
Yeah.
end.
You know, mentioning, sing-alongs, did any of you do sing-alongs with your family or your friends or anything like that?
Well, I can tell you of a situation where my father liked to do sing-alongs. He'd invite some of his friends over, and they go into our downstairs area, and I had a little bedroom near the stairs that went upstairs. And after a while of them having a couple of cocktails, he would start singing, and his favorite song was, "Give me a ranch, a great big ranch, and give me a buckaroo." And then he'd get his friends to sing that along with him. And I thought that was the dumbest thing I ever heard.
After how many cocktails?
That's right. And then I'd fall asleep.
Okay, it really is so interesting because, sing-alongs have sort of faded out after Mitch Miller brought it back.
Right.
Okay, music can change the world because it can change people, and Bono said that amongst his favorite words. And we're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Looking back into the past, it does bring a lot of memories, and since we like to focus on the past, let's continue a little bit. Is there any song or musical activity beside sing-alongs that you and your family did that directly influenced your life as you grew up? How did you get interested in opera?
When I was 23, I took one of these, what I call hop-along tours of Europe. And I didn't know anybody on the tour, and I met this other young woman, and we were traveling around, and we got to Paris, and she said, well, let's go to the opera. I says, let's what? She says, let's go to the opera. And that was it.
And that started it.
You were hooked, huh?
I was hooked. I mean, it just took one opera, and
What was the opera, may I ask?
do you know, I think it was Faust, but I'm not even sure. I remember the Paris Opera House, so that was incredible.
I can imagine.
Maybe it was the opera house that attracted
Yeah, maybe it was the
Very
Opera
well could
House,
have been.
and then I started going a little bit. I go a couple times, and I just figured this is crazy. Subscribe, get it over with.
Well, I know that I went to see Carmen, and that was the beginning of my love of
Is
the
that
opera.
right?
It's still my favorite one.
Oh, yeah.
And as we look at music from the standpoint of your childhood, how did your outlook on music influence your family as you grew up, or your life as you became an adult? Jim?
Well, I think my real music or love of music started at And it kind of infiltrated the family because we had a hi-fi. We were fortunate enough to have, the hi-fi then. But my sister, who's older than I, went to see the play West Side Story. And she loved that music, and she bought the record, the 33 and a third RPM record, and played that. And I just absolutely fell in love with Broadway music. And then I think we didn't have a big family, just my sister, myself, and my parents. And we just kind of would just hum songs from what we heard in the records and on that. And I remember just going down and even in our basement by myself and lip syncing some of the songs. I love that.
That's an important fact. I don't think many people listen to the words anymore.
No.
Because you can't hear them.
That's
I
right.
really can't. But
They
we
don't make
sang
sense.
them.
Oh,
Yes,
sure.
we
Yeah.
sang to the music.
Yes,
Yeah.
and they had the hit parade that was,
right.
published every week
Sure.
with all the words of the popular
Yeah.
songs, and we could sing them all. Now I have a hard time remembering the names of the songs.
That's right.
But you probably can still sing them.
Yes, I can.
I'll bet. We sure.
And Bob, how about you?
Well, as I indicated, I grew up near St. Louis. And in Forest Park, which is in the city, there is a amphitheater where they have what they call the Muni Opera. And during the summer, they would have musicals. And our family would go. And I remember going once, and Judy Garland was performing, and she sang Meet Me in St. Louis about the 1904 fair. And I just thought that was so neat. And I now think up to the present, where we go every month to the Marriott in Lincolnshire and just love to go to the musicals. And are kind of disappointed when they have a musical that we haven't heard of before and don't know any of the songs because we can't sing along, if you will.
Do you feel that your family got the love of musicals from you?
They did to a certain extent. I think most of our love of music was actually listening to it. There's really not been a culture in our family of playing instruments or being in bands or orchestras, but it's been more listening to other performers, and we've loved that. In fact, I remember recently my wife and I were in London and we went to see Les Miserables, and it was just blew our minds. It was just
Right,
fantastic.
Yeah, some of the musicals coming about now are just really, really wonderful. Now, how about you, in your process of growing up and loving opera, do you have any other loves?
Well, what we used to do is we didn't have a lot. We had no musical talent and we had no music lessons. But I somewhere got a record, a 33 and a third, that was called Music to Strip By.
Oh my goodness.
We want to go on with it?
Henrietta.
No, what we did is we collected scarves and hats and gloves and jackets, and we would put this on, and we'd put all this stuff on, and just throw it around the room. And in between, and then we'd be through with one song, and we'd scurry around, pick up whatever we could, put it on. The next swing came around.
I guess you like the tempo.
I guess we did. My mother did it too. We all did it. The whole family did it.
As long as it remained proper.
Oh, it was. We only took off hats and gloves and scarves.
Cute.
I mean, it
Sounds
was
like a lot of fun.
It was really just dancing, but that was the name of the record.
Right, they got you.
Well, you know, one of the things that we did, and I haven't seen it done recently at all, is at Christmas time we would go out and go from door to door in our neighborhood and sing Christmas carols. And it was just really great to go around. You know, we'd ring the doorbell if the light was on, and they'd open the door, and sometimes they'd actually be holding candles for us, you know, as we sang. And I really enjoyed that, but I've never had anyone knock on my door and
No,
say,
me
I want to sing Christmas carols.
The last time I had that happen was in '72 because that's how I met my husband.
Ah,
Great.
It was an interesting experience there.
but I think that's really kind of one of the changes. That doesn't, to my knowledge, it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you know, when you grew up, there was one genre of music, and your children had another genre. How did you adapt to that? Or how did you adapt to the change, you know, from decades ago to a few decades later?
Well, speaking for our family, I mean, obviously you want to be open-minded and, you know, do what you do with your children. But my two girls never were really into the hard rock. So I think it was a little easier for me to adapt to that, to their, because they like the Helen Reddy and Donna Summers and those kinds of singers, Barry Manilow, and that wasn't the real hard rock stuff. So it wasn't as much a transition for me to adapt to that.
I think in our case, we just didn't adapt. We ignored it. I mean, we didn't deny our children from listening to that music. It's just that we didn't listen to it, and it was kind of their kind of separate world where they could do what they wanted to do, and they did.
Right, okay. You know, it is so interesting how it has changed, and we, because we're a little bit older than the general population, we've seen the change in music as it has come along. But music is one way for young people to connect with themselves, but it's also a bridge for connecting with others, and I think every one of you here have survived that change. That was said by Daniel Karp. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Now, time passes, and here we are today. I don't know if you tune into the radio and listen to many of the stations. I know I go and keep turning and turning and turning, but I found one that's sort of light that I can like, and I can even name some of the singers now, but don't ask me to line them up with the songs. What do you think the biggest change between the music you experienced at a younger age and now? What's the biggest change, and how do you feel about it, Henrietta?
I think the music we had, and of course I'm prejudiced, I think it was a lot more fun.
When
I'm saying when we were teenagers, like we're talking the 50s and the 60s, we understood the words, we could dance to it. It was, I mean, there were broken hearts and stuff, but it was basically happy music. And I think it was more fun than the music, and maybe it's because I'm not crazy about the current music, but even though I listen mostly to classical music, I'll listen to the oldies from the 50s and 60s, but I really don't listen to
the modern day music.
No, I don't. It doesn't make your ears feel good.
Oh, that's a new way of looking at it.
Probably a good way of doing it.
Right, and how about you, Bob? What's your feeling?
Well, one of the things I remember most is that you could understand the words. And often the songs had a story behind them. And that's really skewed me towards country western music, because even today, if you listen to most of that, one, you can understand the words, and two, there's a song and there's a story. And it's often, again, as Henrietta said, sometimes a story of a disaster, but there's also the romance and falling in love and going off to Madagascar with somebody. And, you know.
Sounds good. I know one of the old timers, I think it was Johnny Ray, was being interviewed, and he says, you know, in my time, we didn't have to scream, "I loved you." We used to whisper it.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Right. And how about you, Jim?
I have to agree with what Henrietta and Bob had said, and it's very difficult to hear the lyrics. A lot of it's because of the loud boom, boom, boom in the background and the acoustics. And then also, too, it is difficult to understand the lyrics. And I think the thing I find that I have, I guess, maybe a distaste for is when I do hear what they're saying, in many cases it's rather disrespectful.
Yeah.
Or about drugs.
Or insightful, for bad things.
Well, that's, as I said at the beginning, it's sometimes a reflection of the times and the injustices, supposed or real, that some people have brought to mind, and a lot of the people do put it into song. But to us oldies, we'd rather talk about it, discuss it, and come to an agreement rather than scream it out.
Of course, the other huge change is the technological change. I mean, you went from 78 to 45 to 33 1/3 to then the cassettes and then to the discs, and now it's
Not
kind of
even.
in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge
In the
changes.
cloud.
Yes.
Yeah, and that cloud up there.
No, it really is up there. Well, you know, a sad situation, I know in school, I had music. We had music appreciation, yet it seems to be today that because of the testing and everything that's going on, music and art are two of the things that are just disappearing from our
it's
curriculum.
terrible.
How do you feel about that? Do you think that music education is important, Jim?
Yeah, I do. And not because I'm a musician by, I guess to some, I like to listen to it, but I don't play an instrument. But I think to make one more well-rounded, and who's to say that at some point, maybe what we're going through now, this era of loud, irreverent music, might change back again, and might be a result of something that someone might have gotten out of school.
You know, what goes around comes around,
right.
as the saying goes.
That's right.
Bob, how do you feel about that?
Well, the challenges of the schools is like the challenges in a lot of life today. You've got expenses versus revenues. And where do you want to spend the limited revenues you have? And I think you're right. The reality is those very wealthy school districts still have the music. Like we happen to be in Stevenson's high school district. I mean, they still have their musicals, they have their bands, they have their orchestras, but it's in other schools, there's no question, it's one of the things that's been cut, and that's sad.
Henrietta?
Yeah, I think that the arts are extremely important. I think that we have to. Yes, I think science is important, and I think we should do that. But there's part of becoming a human being, and I think the arts are part of whether they're art, music, or it's really important to make somebody a well-rounded person.
You know, in fact, somebody had said that the trouble with music appreciation in general is that they teach us to have too much respect for music, and they should teach us to love it instead. But talking about love, we all love to eat, and usually in the third segment we have a little bit of a treat that we like to tell people about. And there is one that I picked up the other day that was composed of just 2 ingredients and a bowl. And I picked this up at Walmart. You can get all colors. You put it in the microwave for about a minute and a half at 50%, heat, and just stir it. And then I threw in some cocoa roux, but you can use any like pop cereal that you have. And once you do that, you can drop it on a piece of wax paper and let it by the teaspoonful and just let it dry. And then when you're all done, since this is Halloween,
Oh my goodness.
Look at that.
we have a delightful treat that everybody is going to really enjoy
look good.
today. And we'll share this and let us know. But it's a lot of fun and just a little something that we like to add every third segment. But before we leave, I'd like to ask you one more question. What do you hope the future holds for music today? Bob?
I hope there are more songs that come along that people can relate to, that will give them motivation, that will give them stimulation, and that will help them kind of understand the world around them and all the glories that we have available to us.
I think that's a beautiful thought.
Thank
and
you.
you do have beautiful thoughts at times.
I think also someone ought to write a song about that bowl.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, how about you?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, I do enjoy Broadway, and I'm glad to see a lot of the show musicals, the we have to thank Andrew Lloyd Webber for a lot of that.
Right.
Not American, I appreciate that, but to bring all of that back again and bring theater and music, theater music back to that, I hope it continues in that direction.
Right. And you know, they're so available to people today. You know, it's affordable
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
nearby. I think the suburbs really are a great place to be to see these. And how about you?
I think that I'd like to see anybody listen to any kind of music they like, even if I don't like it. We still should have that freedom. And I think I'd like to see people more involved in doing music as well as listening to music. And this means, of course, more musical education, but not always just listening. When the kids getting in the garage with the band, that sort of thing. I think I'd like to see, I like to have that continue.
More creativity on
Right.
their part. Okay, that's a very, very interesting thing, and I want to thank each and every one of you for coming today.
Pleasure.
And I'd like to invite everyone who's listening to come to the Bon. We do have the nutritious meals every day, and we do have a new vendor at present. So we serve a hot meal every day and salad bars on Tuesday and Thursday. And so far, the meals have been fabulous. However, there is one thing that must be remembered. Since it is a hot meal every day, we would like you to call ahead and reserve a spot. Thank you again for coming, and God bless everyone, and God bless each of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.